Serafina Voss stood in the cold, dim room and stared at the small glass vial in her palm. The liquid inside was clear. It looked like water. It looked harmless, but she knew what it was, and she knew what it was supposed to do. 7 moons, Dorian Ashvale said from across the room. His voice was calm, almost bored, as if he were giving her directions to a market, instead of instructions for ending a man's life. 1 drop per visit. By the time anyone notices, it will be too late to trace. Serafina's fingers closed around the vial. Dorian was the beta of her pack, the second most powerful man in the Ashvale territory, and the most dangerous. He was not loud about his power. He did not need to be. His cruelty was quiet and patient, like a trap that had already been set before you walked into the room. "And Eli?" she asked. Dorian smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Your brother stays comfortable as long as you do what you are told. He eats, he sleeps, he waits." The smile faded. "The moment you fail me, that changes." Serafina said nothing. There was nothing to say. She was 22 years old. She had no wolf, or so the pack record stated, because no wolf had ever surfaced in her. Not in childhood, not in adolescence, not in any of the moments when other young pack members had shifted for the first time and felt themselves become whole. She was listed in the pack registry as an omega without a wolf. It made her small in the eyes of those who measured people by power. It also made her invisible. And invisible, Dorian had decided, was exactly what he needed. Her mission was simple to explain and terrible to carry out. She would travel north with the Ashvale trade delegation, present herself as a quiet assistant, blend into the background, and find a way to place 1 drop of the toxin into the wine of Alpha King Calum Draven, then another drop the following week, then another, and another, until the most powerful alpha in the Northern Highlands became weak enough to be removed, and until Dorian Ashvale had the opening he had been planning for years. She told herself she was doing it for Eli. She told herself Calum Draven was probably exactly what the rumors said he was: cold, brutal, a king who ruled by fear. She told herself she would feel nothing. She was wrong about all 3 things. The journey north took 3 days. The landscape changed slowly around the carriage, rolling lowlands giving way to dense forest, then to open ridges of dark stone that climbed toward the sky. By the time Draven Hall came into view, Serafina had memorized every crack in the carriage ceiling and rehearsed her cover story until it felt like memory. The fortress was built into the side of a granite ridge, black and ancient, lit at every window by warm amber light. She had expected something cold and forbidding. What she found instead was a place that felt, strangely, like it was alive. Guards moved in organized, unhurried patterns. Staff members crossed the courtyards without rushing, speaking to each other with ease. A young pack member held a door open for an elderly woman carrying a heavy basket, waited until she was through, and only then continued on his way. It was not what she had pictured. An older woman named Marin met the delegation at the entrance hall. She was the head steward of Draven Hall, white-haired and sharp-eyed, and she greeted each member of the group by name, including Serafina, as if she had been expecting her specifically. She was shown to a room in the east wing, clean, quiet, with a window that looked out over a stone courtyard where pine trees grew in a neat row. That night, there was a formal welcome banquet. Serafina sat near the far end of the long table, 3 seats from the nearest member of the delegation, close enough to pour wine when needed, and far enough to avoid conversation. She kept her eyes down. She was very good at keeping her eyes down. But she looked up when the room went slightly quieter, the way rooms do when someone important enters. Alpha King Calum Draven walked to the head of the table and sat down. She did not know what she had expected. Something louder, perhaps. Something more obviously powerful. A man who filled the room with threat, who made others shrink. Calum Draven did not do that. He was tall, dark-haired, with gray eyes that moved across the room once in a quiet, careful sweep, before settling on the elder pack representative to his right. He said something to the old man in a low voice and listened to the response with full attention, the way someone listens when they are actually interested and not simply waiting for their turn to speak. A few minutes later, something the elder said made him laugh, just once, briefly, genuinely, and the sound of it surprised her more than anything else had so far. She felt something shift inside her chest, a low pull, like a tide beginning to move. She looked away quickly and gripped the vial through the fabric of her sleeve. Not tonight, she told herself. You need to learn the routine first. You need to be careful. She told herself it was strategy. It was not entirely strategy. The trade discussion stretched across several days. Serafina's role was simple. Sit beside the senior delegate. Take notes. Stay quiet. She was very good at all three. She watched Calum work through each negotiation with steady patience. He was not soft. He pushed back on weak proposals with a single precise sentence that left no room for argument. But he was fair. He gave credit to good ideas regardless of who offered them. He did not talk over anyone. On the third evening, she stayed late in the council library after the others had gone to dinner. She was looking for information, background on the hall's daily routines, on Calum's patterns, anything that might help her find a safe opportunity. She had pulled a heavy history of the Northern Highland border disputes from the shelf and was reading it at the long wooden table when footsteps entered the room. She looked up. Calum stood in the doorway. He glanced at the book in her hands. He said nothing, moved to the far bookshelf, pulled out a second volume she had not noticed, and placed it on the table beside her without comment. Then he left. She stared at the book for a long moment. It was a continuation of the same history, the second volume in the series, which she would have needed next. She did not take a note that night. She sat very still for a long time. On the fourth day, he passed her in a corridor and slowed down. He looked at her with a careful, searching expression, the way you look at a word that is on the tip of your tongue, almost there, almost recognized. He did not say anything. He continued walking, but she noticed that his jaw had tightened, just slightly, and she understood in some part of herself that she did not yet have language for, that he had felt something too. That night she held the vial in the dark for a long time, and then put it back in its pouch. Tomorrow, she told herself. She had been telling herself tomorrow for 3 days. On the 6th night, a storm arrived. It came quickly, the way northern storms do, the sky darkening in less than an hour, then rain, then wind that rattled every window in the hall. The power flickered and then gave out entirely. Staff moved through the corridors with candles, calm and efficient, as if this had happened before, and was simply something to manage. Serafina was alone in the East Wing corridor with a candle, when the pull in her chest, that quiet, persistent hum she had been ignoring and dismissing, and explaining away for 6 days, suddenly became something enormous. It moved through her all at once, like a wave breaking from the inside, and for a moment she could not breathe. She heard footsteps behind her stop. She turned around. Calum was standing 10 feet away with a candle in his hand. The flame moved in the draft from the storm window. His gray eyes were on her face, and the expression he wore was not surprise and was not confusion. It was something that looked, more than anything, like relief. The expression of a person who has been searching for something they did not know how to name, and has just, finally, found it. The mate bond settled into place between them. Not slowly. All at once. She had heard about it. Everyone had. The bond that forms between a destined pair, not chosen, not decided, simply recognized by something older and deeper than thought. She had heard people describe it as a click, a lock, a sudden warmth. What she felt was more like a door she had been standing outside her entire life swinging open for the first time, and all the light that had always been on the other side coming through at once. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Then Calum said, very quietly, "It's you." Her candle went out. She stood in the dark with the vial against her skin, and understood that she had a decision to make, and that she had, in some quiet way, already made it. She told him everything that same night. They sat in his private study with one candle between them and the storm outside, and she told him about Dorian, about Eli, about the vial, about every careful, terrible step of the plan she had brought with her into his home. Her voice was steady for most of it. It broke only once, when she said that she had almost done it on the 3rd night, that she had been close, and had stopped, and had not fully understood at the time why she had stopped. He listened to all of it without interrupting. His face was still. When she finished, the silence lasted long enough that she began to prepare herself for whatever came next. He stood and walked to the door. She was certain he was calling the guards. Instead, he opened it and said, calmly, to the attendant outside, "Send for Commander Asha immediately." When the commander arrived, a sharp, quiet woman who moved like someone always 3 steps ahead, Calum gave her a single instruction. Go to the Ashvale Pack's eastern holding area, locate a young man named Eli Voss, and bring him north without harm. He wanted it done quickly and quietly. Commander Asha nodded and left without hesitation. Calum closed the door and turned back to Serafina. "You should have come to me," he said. "I had no reason to trust you," she said. "I had only stories." "And now?" She looked at him across the candlelit room. "Now I have reasons." Eli arrived 2 days later, thin, tired, but unharmed, with wide eyes that took in Draven Hall, and then found his sister's face, and did not leave it for a long time. Dorian Ashvale arrived shortly after, in the custody of the king's forces. His plan unraveled faster than he had thought possible. An investigation conducted by Commander Asha in the days that followed uncovered something much larger than one poisoning attempt. A layered conspiracy that had been building for years, reaching into 3 different packs, with Serafina's mission only the most recent step. A formal tribunal was called, with every major pack leader present. Dorian, even in custody, was composed. He stood before the assembled alphas and elders and built his case carefully, pointing to Serafina, the girl who had carried the vial into the king's home, as the true danger. He was persuasive. She could feel the room shifting, just slightly, toward uncertainty. Then Calum stood. He walked to where Serafina stood at the edge of the chamber, took her hand, and faced the assembly. "She came to me with the truth," he said. "She protected this court when she had every reason, and every threat against her, to do otherwise." He paused. "And she is my mate." The room went very still. Dorian Ashvale had no answer for that. His case, built on the idea that she was a rogue agent acting alone, had nothing left to stand on. The tribunal continued. The verdict was not long in coming. The weeks that followed were not simple. A mate bond between a king and an Omega without a wolf had no clean precedent. Several council members raised concerns, some honestly, and some from older, less honest places. One elder, Lord Varric, called a formal challenge, a hearing to determine whether the bond should be legally recognized under Highland Pack law. Serafina did not want to attend. Marin, the head steward, told her quietly that she had to. The hearing was held in the great council room, with every elder and senior advisor present. Lord Varric made his argument thoroughly and without cruelty. He had nothing personal against her, he said, but the law required a wolf, and without one, the pairing could not be formalized. It was a matter of tradition, of stability, of what the Highland throne required to endure. Serafina stood in the center of the room and listened. She thought about Eli, who was sitting in the 3rd row watching her with his hands folded tightly in his lap. She thought about Marin, who had, sometime in the past 2 weeks, begun leaving small, thoughtful things outside her door. A warm drink in the morning, a book, once a small bunch of pine branches that smelled like the courtyard she could see from her window. She thought about Calum, who was standing across the chamber watching her, with the same steady gray eyes that had looked at her in that dark corridor on the night of the storm, full of recognition and relief. Something woke up inside her. It did not arrive gradually, it came all at once, a presence she had never felt before but recognized immediately, the way you recognize your own name in a language you did not know you spoke. Her wolf, awake for the first time, steady and warm and entirely real, filling all the empty space that had always been there and that she had learned, year by year, not to think about. The room felt different afterward, or perhaps she did. Lord Varric withdrew his challenge without another word. 6 months later, Serafina was in the library when Calum came in and placed a book on the table beside her. She looked at the cover, a volume on Highland diplomatic history she had mentioned in passing 2 weeks ago, not even to him directly, in a conversation with Marin. She looked up. He shrugged, just barely. It was the closest he came to looking uncertain, and she had learned by now that it meant he was pleased about something and did not quite want to show it. She had built something real in those 6 months. There was now a formal support structure at Draven Hall for displaced Omegas, A program that provided housing, training, and legal standing within the pack, something that had not existed before. It was not finished. It would not be finished for a long time. But it had begun, and that was the part that mattered. Eli was thriving in the Northern Highland Academy, studying logistics and pack law under Marin's firm and affectionate supervision. He had grown taller somehow, though she was not sure how that was possible in 6 months. He laughed easily now, the way he had when they were small children, before things had become so difficult. She thought sometimes about the night she had stood in the cold room, with a vial in her hand, and told herself she was doing this for her brother, and that she would feel nothing. She had been sent to poison a king. She had walked into his home, carrying something meant to slowly destroy him. She had sat across from him at a long table and watched him be kind to an old man, and she had felt something shift in her chest that she had no name for yet, but that had not let her do what she had come to do. She had not understood it then. She understood it now. The bond had not waited for the right moment or the right circumstances. It had simply arrived, the way true things do, without asking for permission. And when it came, it had asked only one question of each of them: will you choose this? They had both said yes. That was the whole story. That was all of it. The girl who had been sent to end a king's life had ended up, in the quietest and most permanent way, becoming the reason he laughed more easily. And he had become, without trying, the reason she was no longer invisible. She opened the book he had left. Outside the library window, the pine trees in the courtyard stood still in the late evening air. Everything, for the first time in a long time, was exactly where it was supposed to be.